Hello, thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's 7 o'clock and we're just about ready to start this evening's webinar. And tonight we're going to be looking at empowering pupils and using Oak for independent and home learning. And I'm absolutely delighted to have Roy Ballum with us again this evening, who's going to lead us on our webinar. And this is actually the last in the series of webinars that we've been running, which have been supported by the All Saints Educational Trust. And the aim of these webinars is to try and help teachers embed the Oak National Academy resources into their own curriculum. So this is, this is the 10th. And all of the webinars that we've done before have been recorded and they are available on the Food Effective Life website, as will this one be in the next couple of days. If you've got any questions, please type them in the chat box and they'll be answered at the end. And also at the end, you'll be invited to complete a short online webinar evaluation. Once submitted, you'll be given a link to a downloadable certificate, and then you can download that, add your name and print it out for your records. And there's a QR code on the screen, and then we'll repeat that at the end. Thank you, Roy. So just quickly to run through what we're going to be looking at tonight. So this is really thinking about how you can support your pupils with their own independent learning, so their self-study. And what we want to do is go through the different materials that have been written for the cooking and nutrition curriculum for Oak, and actually give you an overview of how you can use those with your pupils for their own learning, but also the sort of the thought that's gone behind them. Thinking about embedding the materials with your class, excuse me, supporting homework and home learning, building independence for your pupils. And then also at the end, just reviewing a few CPD opportunities for you, because we've got a number of resources that you might find helpful just for your own personal professional development, as well as thinking about how you can use these resources for your classes. And then we're going to think about what the next steps might be. So thank you, Roy. So I'm going to hand over to Roy now, and Roy will hopefully introduce himself and explain a little bit about his role in this process, and also what we've been doing before working with Oak National Academy. So Roy, I'll hand over to you.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks very much for joining us this evening. So I'm Roy Ballum. I used to work with Francis at the British Nutrition Foundation, and about 100 years ago, I was a food teacher as well. And I've been working with the British Nutrition Foundation to help develop the Oak Food and Nutrition curriculum and the lessons on behalf of Oak National Academy. And we're just here tonight to look at some aspects of that. So first of all, just give you a quick overview of the self-study materials. Now, what I wanted to do is I could just quickly show you that there's worksheets and so forth, but I wanted to go a little bit more in depth about why I think they're going to be useful for you. Now, one of the first things to know is when you look through the Oak materials, there are actually materials there from year 1 through to year 9. So whether you're from a primary, middle, secondary school, special school, you can dip in and use basically what you want. So there are actually 108 lessons worth of content that you can access. There are lots of slide decks for each lesson that you can get hold of. There are worksheets for each lesson. There are quizzes. There's a lesson video as well as recipes too. So there's a lot of content that you could use to share with pupils for that independent self-study. And also there's some additional information which is more for the teacher to help you think about if you're planning a practical class or looking at sensory evaluation, or perhaps if you're new to looking at the Eat Well guide. Now, the key thing is that all these materials, there's no reference on them to year groups. So let's say, for example, you're in a school working with year 8s, but actually some of their reading ability is much lower. Well, you can use the year 5 stuff. Or perhaps you're working in a primary school in year 6 and actually you want to access some of the higher information. You can do that too. So just use what you want, which is really good. It's all just pick and choose. It's so flexible to use. And it's also fully editable as well, so you can make it your own. And that's absolutely key because you know your pupils in your school. And they're all free. So there's really sort of nothing to lose by having a look and taking some of these resources and making them your own for your school and your pupils. So one of the big things that you could do and use are the lesson slides with the pupils. So they could use these to actually go through the lesson at their own pace, for example. Now, each lesson, as I say, has a very comprehensive slide deck that you can access. And each slide deck is structured in the following kind of way. So obviously there's a title slide, then there's the outcome. Now the outcome is written very much from the pupil voice. I can do something by the end of the lesson. So it's actually already written in a nice way for the pupils to ease themselves into it. Then there are some key words, so essential for learning new vocabulary as they go through or clarifying different words which they might come upon first time. Then you get into the lesson outline. So all the lessons are sort of like chunked as we go through. And this makes it easier for pupils going through the lesson because it deals with one sort of theme or aspects or concept at a time rather than overloading them. That's a key thing we're going to look at tonight. Then there's all the slides. Now the slides have text, images, illustrations and videos embedded in them. So you can use these as you go through. And then there are also checks for understanding. So this is where it gets interesting for pupils to use. So as you go through the slide deck, there's a check for understanding just to make sure before you progress too much, have the pupils understood that concept or that fact or whatever it is that you wanted to go through. So I think they're quite key. So these are quite good building blocks for that independent learning. Then there are different tasks for them to do at the end of each of those sort of lesson chunks during the lesson outline. So there's a task there that really looks at this. So again, it's something that they could use by themselves or even working in pairs, for example. And at the end, there's also a summary. Now, interestingly, with the task, there's also an explanation of an answer too. So that's actually quite a powerful thing, which we're going to look at a bit later. And as I say, there's a summary, which is really helpful to bring everything together at the end. So there are the lesson slides. Now, why are these so useful for independent learning? Well, one of the key things for Oak is this whole thing about cognitive load theory. Now, there's this intrinsic load, so the difficulty of the material itself. So what it does is it breaks everything into nice small steps, nice small concepts as you go through. So we move from the simple to more complex as well as you go through, progress through the slides. Remember those different outlines of the lesson, the 3 chunks I showed you on the previous slide. So as we go through the lesson, it becomes more difficult as you go through. It also reduces the number of elements that people have got to juggle at once. So everything's broken down into bite-sized steps. And this is quite helpful if they're learning by themselves. So we're using some of that sort of pedagogy to almost help the pupil structure their journey, structure their learning as we go through. Also, we're trying to take away any unnecessary mental effort too. So trying to get away of that overload, and that's caused by often poor design rather than the topic itself. And also trying to make sure there's not too many confusing graphics or too much text or just decoration on a slide. Sometimes you see slides and they just have lots of pretty pictures on, but why are they there? So every picture really does matter as we go through, and this helps them as a learner by themselves. So that's the first chunk, and there's a lot of information you've got there. Also, there are lots of recipes. Now, I know you're very familiar with recipes, and some of your pupils will use them independently in your own classroom. Some may want to use them back at home. And obviously, when we had lockdown, some pupils did actually do some cooking at home if they were able to. Now, all the practical lessons have a recipe. And the recipe is also on the slide deck as well as in each worksheet. So you've got lots of options that you could use for learners in your classroom. And the slide deck also includes information and photos of different food skills and also different techniques. And there's also some videos too. So these are, again, really helpful for pupils that maybe are not familiar with some terms or some food skills, or actually need to see a demonstration or something in action for themselves, because you'll have pupils of different abilities, different levels going through. So again, all of this helping and aiding those independent learners. So why have we got these? So again, it's around scaffolding, particularly on here. So it's a form of scaffolding, getting pupils through a process that hopefully they can perform independently. And by doing this, they're going to be learning sequencing, organization, that cause and effect type thing. So wet ingredients before baking, very simple food science. These things happen. And then over time, you might remove the recipe or give them less of a recipe, or they might be more creative and get them to modify it. So you're actually moving from the imitation through to more independent. So this is one of the key things for recipe, as well as learning the food skills. There's important other factors too. And also we need to think about this cooking independently at school or at home, but particularly focus on the health and safety too. That's of paramount importance, obviously. Also, through the structure, again, we want to look at that cognitive overload going through. So when we've put the tasks together and the recipes within the tasks, we've tried to break it down into clear sequential steps. And this is helping to support those learners whose memory is still developing as we go through. Remember that independent learning. Also, the recipes mean that the pupils don't need to figure out what to do next. They can just focus on how to do it. Really important when they're sort of being introduced or developing these new skills, being in a new room, for example, using a new piece of equipment, sharpening up their different food skills. It offers that clear sequencing without that extra cognitive load. And then we've got the measuring and timing as well. So this other information, just helping them, then they have to hold everything in their memory by having the recipe there. So really, it's about those structured instructions to help pupils manage some complexity. And sometimes recipes can be complex. So what we try to do is to break it down into bite-sized chunks to help that individual independent learner in your classroom. Also, we're hoping it obviously supports other aspects, so about accuracy, so that measuring as well, so everything's very clear, as well as applying their numeracy skills, following those safety steps, so like getting ready to cook or heat control, as well as making sure that when they read these clear instructions, it helps to reduce risk. And they're working by themselves. That's really important in a busy classroom. Also, we want to make sure that these help with that literacy and language development too. So we've got things around looking at different verbs, for example. So we always start a recipe with a verb, so cut, mix, pour, and so forth. But also trying to look at connective things too. So then, after, and finally. So it's a really good, rich way to learn lots of different language skills, as well as sort of key vocab too. But also it's about reading for a purpose too. And of course, when they start to amend and create and write their own recipes, it's a great way of different types of language structure too. The other thing that's all available to you is lots of support around worksheets and quizzes. So basically looking at assessment too. Now I've touched upon a bit of assessment within the slide decks. You'll recall that those checks for understanding, but all lessons basically have a starter quiz. You can just see on the screen here, just pop that up. There's those checks for understanding within the slide deck that we've already seen this evening. It's just an example here. This is a very simple true or false one, because you just want to, just like a touch, sort of low stakes. Is everybody on board? Great, let's just move on. Then we've also got tasks at the end of each of the learning cycles too. So this is a creative task I've put on the screen here. And also there's an explanation of that task too. So there would be an example to show pupils what you were expecting. And then there's an exit quiz too. So there's lots of support here too for you. And all the lessons have that within a worksheet too. So all the tasks within a lesson, in a lesson slide deck, are also on a worksheet. So you've got lots of different resources that you can use to support you, and they're all linked together. They're all very coherent package that you can download for free. So why have we got these things? So again, we've got these good worksheet design. So it's a very clear layout for pupils to read. It focuses on one task at a time. And they also give worked examples, like I mentioned, within the lesson. So you can see here on the worksheet, it's very clear. There's a task here, number 1 for Alex. And then down the bottom, you can see on the slide deck, there's a work through example, just an example. And it's hoped the teacher might then ask other pupils to basically chip in and give them their ideas too. But it's just so pupils get a general idea of what's happening. And this will help pupils become much more independent as they go through too. So also, when we were thinking about this, we need to think about badly designed worksheets. And when they are badly designed, they're really going to increase that overload. And that's why sometimes educators really criticize the overuse of worksheets going through. But what we can also use them for is to practice and skill reinforcement. Obviously, there's that retrieval, that memory practice too, and then also looking at formative assessment as we use them. But also we can use things as immediate feedback too. Do you remember the checks for understanding, for example, or perhaps using some of the starter quiz or the exit quiz? Maybe you could do that all together as a group, and all that structured scaffolding as we go through. But also we need to make sure that anytime we use it, make sure it's purposeful too. We also need to make sure, again, we don't cause that cognitive overload as we go through. So not all worksheets are also going to be beneficial. So we need to make sure that there's not too many questions appearing at the same time. They've got to make sure that the pupils don't have to search for information across multiple pages or slide decks, for example. We've been really keen to make sure that the instructions are not too vague. That's really important, because how do they know what to do? Or maybe look at tasks which they're not really familiar with at the moment. So actually, I'll be setting them up to fail, for example. And signs of that would be, and I'm sure you know in your own classroom, sort of random guessing, just giving up quickly, copying things down because they don't understand, and just being very slow despite that effort going into. So there's lots of support here, and again, all designed to help the individual learner, whether they're doing it in the classroom or at home, maybe as homework too. There's also lots of video lessons you can get. Now you can see here, there's yours truly on the top right hand of the screen. Now each lesson, there's a video of the whole lesson that's been recorded. And this is a feature of the Oak National Academy. So whether you're doing cooking and nutrition to French, history and English, there's a video for every single lesson to go through. And the recording essentially is a clear explanation of the lesson. And it includes the modelling, the tasks, the feedback. And this has a really strong pedagogical and cognitive science rationale. So it's really important in here to support pupils' learning. And it can support in the classroom, but also that independent learning too, by extending that high quality teaching beyond that live instruction as we go through. And the recording has those explanations for pupils with all the embedded tasks going through, including all the feedback and modelling of those different ideas that you go through. So really helpful for learning independently, just the pupil by themselves. So this basically, the videos as we go through really help to reinforce that dual exposure information, so pupils can re-watch an explanation, they can revisit ideas at their own pace, they can pause things to try and get their head around difficult concepts or replay them or slow it down, and they can help it by looking at things in repetition, so helping to strengthen memory and reduce those misconceptions as we go through too. So from a cognitive point of view, it really does support that retrieval and consolidation of information that they're learning, and really helpful when pupils are working by themselves. We've also been really keen to make sure that they support scaffolding and gradual independence too. So a recorded lesson, for example, can be modelling. So watch me do this. I'm going to show you how to peel a carrot. I'm going to show you how to use nutritional analysis software. I'm going to show you how to look at the Eat Well guide, for example. Then there's be some guided practice through the video too. So pause and I want you to try. Let's do this together. And then lastly, you go through those independent tasks, but with some feedback too, just to make sure they're on the right track. So this really does mirror that effective classroom pedagogy. So I do, we do, and you do. So that modeling, that guided practice, and then that independent task, just so that pupils can practice this without actually losing any structure going forward. And again, that cognitive overload for learners. So live explanation sometimes in the classroom can be fast, and many pupils may miss key steps. Then probably some of them are probably not even listening. So, but the recorded can help to, externalize those instructions so people don't have to hold everything in their memory at the same time. Allows the learners to process that information in smaller bite-sized chunks, for example. Supports pupils who need more time to listen and process those instructions, or just need things to be repeated in the classroom too. And what we hope is, as we go through this is going to help to promote that independent and more inclusive learning using the videos. And those recorded lessons will help pupils to catch up, for example, after absence, which is quite useful, revise before assessments too. And lastly, learn at a comfortable pace for them. So very individual, very independent. What I really like about the Oak platform as well, if you haven't been on the Oak website, there's also interactive quizzes that the pupils can undertake, which is a great part of the assessment package that's available for them. And all the quizzes are available for every single lesson. So all quizzes for all lessons. So there's 108 different quiz packages available that you can do, and they're all available via the Oak website. And what you can do, they can be part of a lesson, and you can download the worksheet as well. So pupils can go online, they can get a very nice introduction to it. So the bottom right hand screen image there, they can then do the starter quiz, they can then watch the lesson video with, for example, the worksheet, so they can work through the quizzes and the tasks that are given to them in real time, and then they can do the exit quiz at the end. And you can share these links to these quizzes, these sort of areas, really, really simply via the Oak website. So why are these really helpful? Well, one thing is they really do help to promote that self-regulated learning. So they can monitor their own progress and get instant feedback, and they can retry it as well, which is really important. They can look at that quiz, reveal knowledge gaps as well, which is really helpful for them to judge about what they really do understand, what they need to go back and revisit at another time. That cognitive overload, yet again, so it's structured, one question at a time. So we're trying not to confuse pupils. You can see here on the screen, the starter quiz here is one question, it's a true or false, but there are different types of questions styles that are available on the Oak platform too. What we also hope is for independent learners, it's going to build that autonomy and also motivate them too. So it's flexible pacing and it's fairly low stake, but it's that practice through persistence and really kind of taking that ownership for their own learning too. We also want them to develop other skills, so planning, reviewing their own areas of weakness, for example, and perhaps setting their own goals too. And also it's trying to make sure we use these in balance. So we could use these, but also perhaps with discussion and those deeper learning tasks, which we've seen in the slide decks too. You can just see on the screen a couple of more different examples of the way the different styles of questions are. So we've had a true or false, we've got a multiple choice, and then we've also got a missing words thing. And then also we've got one where you can drag things in the right order too. So lots of different styles to learn with. So again, you can use these again as part of your scaffolding to really help pupils move from that teacher-directed learning towards more independence too. So that's an overview of the resources that are available to you. And I really wanted to show you the kind of the background thought that's been available within them and how they will support that independent learning going forward. Now, how do you embed it? Now, you know yourself, you know your school, you know your own schemes of work, schemes of learning. So I'm just done a quick sort of summary here for you, and I'm sure you know this by now, but some simple sort of situations might be homework. Maybe you need to set a cover lesson and you need some homework at the end, or perhaps you're just looking for homework ideas. Well, we've already looked at those starter and exit quizzes from a lesson. Now, they could be the paper-based ones or jumping down a couple of bullets. They could be the interactive quizzes on the Oak website because they're one and the same, remember. Also, you can use the worksheets too, because they're available on every single lesson. They're available as a Word document for you to edit, as well as a PDF. So you've got lots of stuff there that you can use to help support homework and that learning, back at home when they come through. Also, we've got the self-study in class or at home. So again, you've got that starter quiz, you've got all those slide decks, which include those checks for understanding and the different tasks, which are also explained. And then also we've got worksheets available for those slide decks, so they can check their work, go through them and listen. And then obviously we've got that exit quiz, which could be the interactive quiz too. I thought a nice idea might be a cover lesson, for example, where perhaps the teacher there could help to play the video, the lesson video, and pause it at different stops. And they can then do the check for understanding, pause the video for pupils to undertake the tasks. And they could use the worksheets for them to complete based on the tasks that are on the video. So again, supporting independent learning, but through cover. And then, of course, if the school's closed, well, there's the whole Oak curriculum, units and lessons there for you to use. So how does this support homework and home learning? So I've already talked quite a bit about the sort of pedagogy of this for the individual resources, but let's just do a bit of a summary now about how I believe this is all supporting you in school. Well, I think going through the Oak materials, with really being sort of purposeful, and that's really important. So the homework is aligned with clear learning goals, and this is all part of the structure of the slide decks to the worksheets to the quizzes. Everything clicks together. It really does bring everything together in one place really easily. It's also very structured guidance too. So there's lots of models and examples, step-by-step instructions and success criteria so pupils can work more independently at home. So that could be seen through the slide decks or the videos, for example. So we have those low stakes digital tools. So yes, in the classroom, you could do a low stake one by using those checks for understanding, pupils putting their hands up as they go through. But also we have got those interactive quizzes, the videos, and also we've got those guided worksheets too, to really try and reinforce that classroom learning, but also give instant feedback. And also we've got this whole thing around supporting metacognition. So really looking at including prompts for pupils to check their answers, reflect on mistakes, and identify next steps too. So this is all part of the sort of the video and the slide deck to really support pupils' learning going through. Also, we want to make sure that we've got that accessibility and inclusion. So clear language, the keywords as well. We're managing that workload as we go through, just through the design, as well as the amount of content that we're putting on. And also we've got alternatives, for example, maybe with pupils who've got a limited technology access too. So things can be printed out. Not everyone's got access online. We're also thinking that if it isn't independent learning, maybe at home, supporting homework, actually the materials also give very simple explanations that parents and carers can engage with as well, without them actually having to do the teaching too. And also we've got that evidence-informed practice. So all of this, all the Oak materials have been based on evidence and research. For example, using the Education Endowment Foundation, and that's really important about therefore emphasising short, focused tasks that build that routine and that independent study habit. And that's one of the Oak principles of looking at evidence-based going through. So effective homework then reduces that confusion, and that effective homework resources rather reduces that confusion. It reinforces that classroom learning, and it gradually builds that pupil's independence as you go through. So what about building that pupil independent skills? What does that look like? Well, you've got that use of scaffolding with gradual release as you go through. Remember, we talked about I do, so teaching model. So watch me, I'm going to do this. I'm going to show you how to use the bridge hold here. Then we've got the we do, so guided practice, doing it together. And then you've got you do, that independent practice. And that's hopefully going to help pupils be guided from the support to more autonomy going through. So you can see that from each example using the videos of individual skills or the lesson as well. But also we've got within the slide deck the explanation of the tasks too. So that's really helpful in sort of showing pupils how things can be figured out, how can be worked out to support themselves going forward. And also we just got this whole thing around sort of modeling that thinking process. So we've got the task here, but also we've actually got the video explaining the background to actually completing that task, really trying to help them go forward. Also looking at best practice, we've got structured practice. So we've got those retrieval tasks, low stake quizzes, and clear success criteria. This is to help your pupils build that confidence, which is really important, and also reduce that cognitive overload. So you can see here that quick low stake check for understanding just on the top right hand of the screen. We've got really clear purposeful routines. So for example, we've got lots of things in the materials about self-checking, peer feedback and reflection. So you can see the sensory evaluation thing here. And we're also just trying to build that independence with support. So there's some feedback, clear instructions, but that scaffolding in place just to make sure all pupils can access that learning. So one of the key things here then is about that independent developed through intentional scaffolding, that metacognition, and also the structure of the resources that are being provided. Right, I really hope you found that part useful. So that's all the materials that are available to you to use for free to support your pupils at school, and hope I've showed you that by using them can help support them become more independent learners and look at that self-support as we go through too. Now, how about you? What's available for you to support your CPD? I mean, well, obviously there's this evening, which I hope you found useful, but there's also the other 9 presentations that have been available too. But what we also suggest is, if you haven't done so already, is to maybe audit what you do. And what we've got on the Feed a Fact of Life website, which when you get this presentation, you'll be able to click through on the different links to go directly to the information. There's a nice audit tool that you can use. And I think it's always a great way of looking at it, like, or discover what you don't do or don't know. I think that's a good way, because we can always learn every single day. And then you can also go through the planning guide that we've produced. And also there's a smart planner too, just to really think about what are your priorities, what could you do, and thinking about those timescales and priorities of those different tasks that you might want to undertake. There's also lots of training and resources available, and we've tried to be a little bit sort of innovative, and we've got some really great sort of decision trees that you can download and click through and find information about your own CPD, your training, as well as lesson planning as well going forward. And those are curriculum planning decision trees, which is quite helpful because you can go through it and have sort of like a more emphasis in your curriculum planning. Maybe you'd like an emphasis more on healthy eating, or perhaps food skills and cooking, and it enables you to go through a pathway to plan your own curriculum. As I mentioned, we've got those previous training sessions, so all the recordings are available. So in total, there's a package of 10 different videos and 10 different presentations with lots of support on there to help you, and perhaps when you're working with colleagues, for example, too, and you could share this with other people. And then what I would suggest is to review and use the Oak material. So get online, have a go, perhaps have a go looking at the pupil quizzes, for example, the interactive quizzes. That's a great way of really getting to get your feel for everything too. So here's the link. So when you get the presentation, you'll be able to go straight through and access those resources. Now, I've mentioned Food Factor Life, and I'm sure many of you are familiar of this website. It's a great site, lots and lots of stuff on it. There's a great section as well, which was actually produced within COVID times, remote learning. So you go under whole school at the top, the main menu, and then there's a remote learning section, and there's some great things on here. So there's activities and ideas, there's good practice at home. Perhaps you could share that with parents and carers, different resources that could be useful, and support for teachers too. And when you go in, for example, the activities and ideas, there are lots of information available on there. In fact, there's probably over 600 different resources, activities and ideas that you could use that have been tested and used for pupil learning at home during the COVID time. I think it's just a rich resource that you can dip into and use. And again, it's all free for you to access. There's also, I would say, further information and support from Oak. Now, if you haven't done so already, Oak also has its own AI tool as well, and I think it's really great. You can use it to develop lessons off the cuff. It's very, very education focused. It's all focused on the national curriculum. It links up the different subjects together, and you can really kind of fine tune a lesson. So you might fine tune it for pupils with different additional needs, for example. You might focus that you want to do more independent learning. I think it's a great way. So you haven't played with it yet, I'd have a go, thoroughly recommend it. It might change your lesson planning and your lesson creation for good going forward. So have a good play with that one. And there's the link that you can get. But if you go to the main Oak website, you can get directly to it. Just use the menu at the top. Right, I'm going to hand over to Francis now, but thank you very much for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed learning more about how Oak resources support independent learning and pupils' home study too. Thanks, Francis.
Thanks, Roy. That was fantastic. And what I really love about this session is it's really made me think about what's important when writing resources. I mean, we all write resources, and Roy and I have done it for a very long time, but we just sort of get into the habit of doing it. But then actually really thinking about the purpose for each of the different types of resources and the way that they should be presented, I think is a really useful thing. So thanks for that, Roy. So next steps, as I mentioned, this is the last of our series of live webinars, but we do have all of the previous ones recorded. But what we think it would be great for you to do, and we would recommend, is that you first of all, if you haven't done so yet, have a look at the Oak curriculum and the lessons. There's a fantastic array of free lessons and resources and support information for you available via the Oak National Academy website, and not only cooking and nutrition, but a whole curriculum that you could need. Audit what you currently do and identify any gaps using the tools that Roy went through a few minutes ago, and then try out a few lessons, worksheets or recipes just to get a taste. Get your pupils trying them, get some feedback from them. The other thing as well is that everything is editable, so you can change them in order to suit your setting and your pupils and what you're actually needing for your lessons. Use the tools that Roy has mentioned on Food Effective Life. And although we've got join us for the next training session, unfortunately this is the last one, but do have a look at all of the recordings that we've done so far, and also the PowerPoint presentations. So when you get this presentation, all of the links are available to the previous sessions. And as you can see, we've covered lots and lots of different topics over the last few months. I can't believe we started this back in September, talking about getting started with Oak. And now we're finishing off in February, looking at empowering your pupils. So we've sort of come full circle almost. So thanks, Roy. Um, so if you've got any questions, then please do pop them in the chat. Roy, I've got a question for you. This is off the cuff. I didn't plan for this, but actually it came up in my mind as I was listening to you. And I was thinking about the fact that we're suggesting some of these resources can be used for home learning. And I think that's great, because although hopefully we haven't got the same issues that we had during the coronavirus, but there are lots of reasons why there could be home learning. And one of the things that we were thinking about around the recipes was around supervision and anything else that sort of teachers need to be aware of. And I'm just wondering if you've got sort of any top tips or any further advice around that.
Well, I think what the Oak platform does is with each of the practical lessons I mentioned, yes, there's the recipe, there's very clear instructions on actually doing the practical work, which looks at lots of other embedded learning as well. So, for example, it always mentions things around health and safety, for example, hygiene and safety, for example. But what there was also is additional information for the teacher with some very practical, pragmatic advice about setting up the classroom, things to look out for. So, you know, where there's going to be crunch points in a lesson, but also things around sort of modification to, and also particularly looking at aspects, for example, around the ingredients. So if you need to think about any allergens, or perhaps you've got pupils that follow a vegan diet, for example. So what I would say is have a look. There's lots of practical, pragmatic advice that is available there, particularly looking at practical lessons. And I think actually with the use of the lesson videos and the recipe, I think it's a great way for pupils to have a go. And it's very structured around supporting them and making sure that they're safe, because we want to make sure they're successful and grow that confidence and competence ultimately after kind of engaging with the food lessons.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for joining us this evening, everybody. If you could go on to the next slide for me, Roy, please, that'd be brilliant. I mentioned right at the beginning that we've got a very short evaluation, so we'd be very grateful if you could complete that. The QR code is on the screen. If you can't do it this evening, then you will be sent a link to it tomorrow, along with the video recording and also the PowerPoint presentation. And then once you've completed the evaluation and submitted it, you'll be given a link to a downloadable certificate, and then you can pop your name on it and print it out for your records. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you if you've joined us for any previous webinars. And as we've mentioned a couple of times, there are the recordings of the previous webinars online, so do take some time if you can, have a look at those, and hopefully they'll help support you using Oak National Academy Cooking and Nutrition resources in your schools. So thank you very much, and have a good evening. Bye-bye.